Hello, Matt here from Education News. Today we're going to be talking about student loan forgiveness and as well as what was just said at the Supreme Court. On August 24th of last year, the Biden administration stated that they would enact student loan forgiveness. This was anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000 per borrower, depending on income levels as well as whether the individual got Pell Grants or not. During President Biden's campaign season for the 2022 election, he essentially promised that he would work on student loans. Initially, the student loan forgiveness was going to be roughly around $40,000 and had essentially been knocked down to $10,000 to help gain support. As soon as this plan was enacted, it essentially immediately got pushed into the courts. That meant that a number of individuals sued, and that stopped the process of forgiveness. Individuals were able to sign up, but they did not have those loans forgiven. There's two big cases. One is Biden versus Nebraska, and the other one's the Department of Education versus Brown. While both of these cases argue the same point, essentially that Biden had exceeded his authority in doing this, they do kind of go about it in different ways. Reasons why these two cases are important and why they're both being heard is that the Supreme Court's hearing them on the same day and probably will combine them to make a singular argument. This is not uncommon for the Supreme Court. They often take a number of similar cases and then roll them up and make one big decision. Now, the cases were actually heard on February 28th. This is Tuesday of this week. While the Supreme Court is a court, this process is very different than probably what you'll see on TV. So rather than having a judge and a jury and a defendant and all of this, it's really just a bunch of justices that sit down and then lawyers present a case and the justices ask them information based on that. Some justices don't even talk. Clarence Thomas, one of the Supreme Court justices, is kind of notorious for that. He often does not ask questions. So both sides presented their arguments. To present in front of a Supreme Court, you have to know what you're doing. So both sides have really strong lawyers. Something that really came out of this is going to be an issue called the Major Questions Doctrine. And this is kind of what the conservative justices are going to be thinking about when they rule on this case. Now, the Major Questions Doctrine has a ton of history behind it, and there's obviously people that bicker continuously on if it should even be a thing. But essentially what it boils down to is that the court should not rely on an agency's statutory interpretation of a law on issues that have highly economic impacts or issues that are really politically significant. Why do I even bring this up? Well, the court's already used major question doctrine to go ahead and block things that the Biden administration has done, namely in a case called West Virginia versus the EPA. So in the line of questioning, the Supreme Court, namely Chief Justice Roberts, essentially asked questions involving the major questions doctrine. That kind of gives an insight into what some of these Supreme Court justices are thinking or maybe how they're going to rule. It's going to be multiple months before we actually get a ruling, probably sometime in June at the end of the session. But if they're already talking about the major questions doctrine, which has already been used to block Biden administration things, it's possible and probably likely that they're also going to use that to block this student loan forgiveness. Like I said, no one can really predict the future, but that's probably where it's going to lean. We also have a 6-3 conservative majority on the court. That should be considered as well. At the most base level, what you should get out of this is that the Supreme Court is going to look and see, does the executive branch, the president, have the ability to forgive nearly $1 trillion worth of student loans? Or is that economic impact so much that that really relies on the legislative body, Congress, so the House and the Senate, its ability to control the purse? Hopefully, it will not take a Supreme Court case for people to really analyze what student loans mean and what the cost of education is now. It is skyrocketed over the past 20 years and is really unaffordable for almost everyone. We'll definitely pay attention to this court case. I'll keep updating you. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're interested in this type of content, and I hope you have a wonderful week.